Prabhupada Gurudev ki. So, as I request, if you all can move here, it will be very hard for me to have eye contact. There will be some major juggling required with my neck. Thank you so much for understanding. Om Jai Bihar Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. So again, on behalf of His Divine Grace C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada and the Temple Administration of ISKCON Chicago, New Seva Kunj, I would like to welcome all of you to this Sunday Feast program. Although Prabhuji had announced that I am from Canada, slight correction, I am from Chicago. This is my home, New Seva Kunj. This is where everything started. So, no matter where I am in the world, this is my home. So I'm very glad to be here again amongst all of you, especially my dear host, Nitai Sundar Kishore Kishori and Lord Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Devi and many of my old colleagues, friends, devotees and associates. So it's such a pleasure to be here again. And of course, I'm very grateful that the devotees have considered me of some capability to address this esteemed Sunday Feast crowd. My desire is that may His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada and all the Vaishnavas in our line bless me so that whatever words I may speak may be pleasing to them, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the Vaishnavas assembled. So today's topic is, or rather the theme of the month is about who am I? And specifically within that subject, eternal duty. So I will try to, within the limited time that I have, try to expound based on my capability on this subject matter. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, sometimes many people in this world, and since time immemorial, I cannot even put a date on history, we always have a certain philosophy that guides us in our life, or in our lives rather. And it is but natural to be inquisitive. In the essence of the Vedas, known as the Vedanta, Ved means in Sanskrit, if I translate that simply into English, means to know. Vitta means to know. And knowledge is of many a variety. Just like some of you who are assembled here go to school and college, and some of you who are working may be involved in continuing education. So there are different types of subject matters that one can learn. And the most exalted, if I may use that word, and the most advanced system of knowledge is to be found in the Vedas, which is the ancient wisdom that exists since time immemorial, and that it is actually the Word of God. Those who are of the Christian background also, in the Bible is the Word of God. So when we say, or those who are of different faiths, or who have knowledge about different faiths, they speak about their own sublime scriptures, which are none other than words of wisdom that helps us advance and understand the purpose of life. And the Vedanta Sutras are acronyms, short abbreviations that actually comprises of many detailed subject matters. It's just a clue. Like sometimes when somebody's playing a game and like say a dumb charade or something, and when they just give a clue, you're supposed to find out the answer. So similarly, the exponent of all the Vedas, Vyasdev, Ved Vyasji, has compiled Vedanta Sutra. And the second Vedanta Sutra, the acronym is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. It's an incomplete sentence, just a few words. Athato means therefore. Brahma Jigyasa means spiritual life. Therefore, one must inquire about spiritual life. So it's an incomplete sentence, but what does that really mean? It's very exhaustive in meaning and very powerful if one contemplates on it. Because we have this human form of life, we must inquire about higher subject matters. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. And not every entity, especially those who do not have a human form of life, are capable. In the scriptures it is also said, Ahar Nidra Bhai Maitunamchal Etad Nararam Pashubhi Samana Dharmena Adhika Visesho Dharma Vihina Pashubhi Samana. Eating, sleeping, mating and defending are the four functions that are common to man and animals. But man is endowed with one more special function, which is known as dharma, spirituality. Dharmena adhika visesha. Adhik means extra. Visesh means special. So we are endowed with that special faculty. When we compare other living entities or animals, and dharma vihina, Pashubhi Samana, very strong words. If we do not cultivate spirituality, then we are as good as animals. Because if we simply eat, sleep, mate and defend, these four things, even animals do that. So what's the big difference between us and them? So therefore one must inquire about this, because we have got this human form of life, about what is known as the science of self-realization, which in Sanskrit is known as Vijnana. Most of you all I see are from the Indian body background, and in your respective languages, most of you all have heard the word Vijnana. But Vijnana, the normal term that most people understand Vijnana is the sciences of physics, chemistry, biology that we learn in school and colleges, universities. But the word Vijnana in Sanskrit, if you do Sandhi Vichhed, meaning if you break it down, Vishesha Jnana iti Vijnana. Vishesh means special and Jnana means knowledge. That knowledge which is special is known as Vijnana. So what is that special knowledge? Special knowledge is, who am I? Who am I? Sometimes those who are very thoughtful do come across this question within their hearts. And we tend to, based on our experience in this life and from our previous lives, we tend to speculate on as to who we are. Supposing if I ask a child or even a normal person, who are you? So he will say, my name is, say, John. But that's your name, but sir, who are you? Oh, I am such and such, working for such and such a company. But that's your occupation, but who are you? Person can get a little irritated. He says, well, what do you mean? Can't you see I'm a human being? When further the question arises, that is your body, but who are you? So, if we really think about this deeply, then we can make an attempt to understand based on our own faculty, but it is better to understand this from those persons who are fully realized. There are three ways of acquiring knowledge. The first method is what we call as pratyaksha praman, meaning whatever knowledge we can acquire with our senses. Like most of us, this philosophy is very common. Seeing is believing. Whatever I see, whatever I perceive, I will believe. A second way of acquiring knowledge is hypothesis, which is known as anuman. Through experimental basis, we can try to acquire some knowledge. And we could be right, we could be wrong. And that is why it is called experiment. And the third way of acquiring knowledge is known as Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman means when knowledge is acquired through a perfect source, just by simply hearing. And out of the three, Shabda Praman, or those who are very fortunate to get information through a perfect source, is the most perfect. Because, let's say seeing is believing. Supposing if this, right now we are seated in this temple hall, and suddenly there's a power failure, and everything goes off, all the lights. There is not even a matchstick to light up a candle, and we are all cast into darkness. And then neither can you see me, or neither I can see you. But does that mean that you all don't exist or I do not exist? So, our senses have some limitation. Another example, if I may. If I have to read a book, if I keep it at this distance, I can read it nicely. But if I bring it close to my nose, I don't think I can read a single letter. Or if it is somewhere right back there, people seated on the bench, and if they hold that book up there, I cannot read. My senses have limitations. Everybody's senses have limitations. Experimentation, hypothesis, which most of us are used to when it comes to scientists and labs and stuff like that. Just the word experiment alone defines hypothetical conclusions that if we do this, then we may get this result and we may be successful, but there are so many times one fails. Hypothesis is something like, let's say we are all seated here. Upstairs there is some quarters, some rooms upstairs, and if we hear some thumping or some sound, we can speculate that maybe it is some devotee upstairs who is in their rooms, or it could be that there could be somebody who may have sneaked in through the window, a thief, or it could be a cat. So that could be hypothesis. It's not 100% sure. But when we receive knowledge from a perfect source, then we are most fortunate. Srila Prabhupada always used to harp on that. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say that those who get information from a perfect source are the most fortunate. As an example, I never saw my grandfather. I was told by my father that when he was only 5 years old, his father passed away. When his mother was only 2 years, when he was 2 years, my grandmother passed away. But we had the photographs of our grandparents. And when my father said that this is your grandfather and this is your grandmother, then me and my siblings believed that because it came from the perfect source. So here, the information that comes in, seeing is believing fails. Because I've not seen my grandfather, it doesn't mean that he did not exist. Or did he exist? Many of us have not traveled all over the world. And if I describe a particular part that I have been, and most of you all may have not been, does that mean that that particular country does not exist? It does. When we were in school, we learned about Americas. We learned about the European continent. We learned about the Asian continents, sitting in the classroom without leaving the classroom. Why? We learned it from our teachers who were knowledgeable. So similarly, the science of self-realization of who I am, who am I, and what is my eternal duty can be learned from such transcendentalists who has seen the truth. And we are most fortunate because we come in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who Acharyas like His Divine Vishnu Prabhupada has given us this information as it is. And Bhagavad Gita, especially, which is the word of God. Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, spoke Bhagavad Gita. Dharmantu sakshat bhagavad pranitam. What is dharma or what is duty? It is whatever the Supreme Lord has ordained. It is not subject to speculation, not subject to what I think or what he thinks or what he thinks or what she thinks or what he thinks or what we all think. Because our experience is very limited and it is completely within the domain of the material world. In 1922, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave darshan. He met Professor Suthers of the Ohio State University. And Professor Suthers asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that you speak of all this spiritual worlds and you speak of that realm. How do you know? So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada said that one is most fortunate if one meets a person who is from that domain and who can give you information about that spiritual world and the spirit. So Krishna himself in the Bhagavad Gita, that is in the second chapter, which is the summary of Bhagavad Gita, he mentions, I think there are at least about 15 verses that explain who the soul is. He tells Arjuna, it is not that I never existed or all these soldiers never existed, nor you existed in the past, in the present, and in the future. You will never cease to exist. He mentions, Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara prapti dhirastatra namuyati. The body changes just from childhood to youth and from youth to old age, but the soul within never changes. And at the end of old age, the body is finished. But when the body is finished, the soul is not finished. And those who are sober and those who understand this will never lament. Most of us have been coming in some kind of a spiritual environment because that is what human beings are all about. Inquiring about the higher science of self-realization. And there are three components, if I may. There is knowledge, understanding, and realization. Most of us, if we do not practice our spiritual practices as ordained by our spiritual masters perfectly, we will always remain on the platform of knowledge and understanding. Realization is extremely rare. That is why Krishna also in the Bhagavad Gita says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanvan mam prapadyate vasudev sarvamiti sarvatma sudurlam. After many, many births, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanvan mam prapadyate, one who is situated on the spiritual platform will surrender unto me. Upon realizing that Vasudev Sarvamiti, I am all in all, I am everything, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such a personality is indeed very rare, and I consider him to be a Mahatma. I consider him to be a great soul. So ultimately we have to go beyond the first two stages of knowledge, understanding and come to the platform of realization. And the moment we come on the platform of realization, Krishna assures us, as he has assured in the Bhagavad Gita, what are the symptoms of that person. Brahma bhuta prasanna atmana sochati na kankshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktir labhate para. One who is situated on the highest platform of Brahma. Brahma means spiritual realization, the science of self-realization, that I am not this body, I am a spirit soul. Not only that, I am an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. That is complete realization. Anything beyond that or less of that is not full realization. Many spiritualists come to the conclusion that I am a spirit soul, but then ultimately their understanding and realizations are not complete until and unless they come to the platform of understanding that I am an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. And that can only be obtained through a process, just like when we go to school and college, and when we graduate, postgraduate, we get our doctorate degrees, etc. We follow a certain process. And the more studious the student, the more excellence that student can obtain. Through our simple examples, we can prove, right sitting in this room, that we are not this body. As an example, I've used this before many times. When I say that this is my shawl, am I distinctly separate from the shawl? Yes or no? Yes, right? When I say these are my glasses, am I distinctly separate from these glasses? Yes or no? Right? Similarly, when somebody is extremely sick, goes to a doctor and says, "Doctor, my hands are hurting, my knees are hurting, my whole body is hurting. So if this is my body, who am I?" Even in our vocabulary, in a very subtle way, we acknowledge that the body and the soul are separate. There was one several decades ago, one very big industrialist, a very big business magnate from India, he traveled through one of the prominent airlines, I think it was Air India, and he came to New York, and he came with his entire team, one of his sons, his advisors, his managers, and his whole team, and they all traveled first class. And then, when he came to New York after a few days, he died. Now the son said to the airline that, I have my other siblings at home, my mom is there, and we would like to take my father back home, and we would like to, cremate him in India, where the whole family is waiting. So they requested the airline, we already are holding return first class tickets, and we don't mind paying for the entire first class cabin, but we want to make sure that our father's remnants, his body, comes back comfortably home. But the Air India authority says, "No sir, we cannot. No matter how much you can, money you can spend, the body of your father will go with the cargo." So basically, what is this? This is Samsonite. This is luggage. The real person is gone. This is a true fact. It happened. They tried through all means, called up the government authorities, the Indian consulate, and many other persons, but they have a certain protocol. No dead body can travel where passengers travel. It has to go into the cargo. When we go to a wake or in a funeral, we find that that person is head to toe, is lying down in state, as if that person is sleeping. But when we give that eulogy, when we speak about that person, oh, he was such a wonderful person, such a wonderful brother, such a wonderful son, such a wonderful friend, and they all speak. They speak in the past tense. So where is he gone? So that tells us that we are not this body, but we are a spirit soul. But that realization is very important. And if we come to that realization, there will never be any problems in this entire creation. Because as far as the body is concerned, it is called Upadhi. Naradji in the Narad Bhakti Sutra, he says, Sarva Upadhi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam risikena risikesha sevanam tad bhakti ruttam. Tad bhakti ruchyate. What does that mean? One should go beyond all problematic designations, upadhi. Upadhi, most of you all know the meaning of the word, whether it is in Hindi or Gujarati or whatever. Upadhi means a problem. And what is the biggest problem? That when we identify ourselves with this body. Sarva upadhi vinirmuktam. One has to go beyond this bodily designation, which is a big problem. Tatparatena nirmalam. We have to purify our existence. And how do we do that? Risikena risikesha sevanam tad bhakti ruchyate. When we serve with our senses, which is known as Rishik in Sanskrit, and the master of the senses is known as Rishikesh. Rishikesh means Aish means the master or the Lord, and Rishik means the senses. So one has to serve the master of the senses, and then we will be purified. And that is what devotional service is. That is what bhakti is. And every living entity or every substance has their dharma or their eternal constitutional position. Dharma is defined as a duty. And there are many, many different types of duties one can possess or one can have. But what is the eternal duty of every living entity? Or what is the dharma? His Divine Wisdom Prabhupada gives some very wonderful some examples about what dharma is. For example, dharma or the constitutional position of a substance as an example of salt. If there's a white powder and somebody puts that in your palm and you taste it, if it is salty, then you know that this white substance is dharma or its eternal constitutional position is saltiness. If it is bereft of saltiness, it is not salt. What is the eternal dharma of fire? Fire, we see fire in our homes in the sense when you light up your stove, heat and light. If heat and light are missing, then it is not called fire. Similarly, what is the dharma, the eternal dharma, or the constitutional position of the soul, or the jiva? And the answers are given in our vast, exhaustive spiritual literatures. The cream of Vedic literature known as Srimad Bhagavatam explains, Savai pumsam paro dharma yato bhakti radokshaje ahitukiya pratiyata jena atma suprasidati. The highest duty of mankind, meaning the soul. Savai pumsam paro dharma. There are many dharmas, many duties. One may say the duty, my duty is towards my family. My duty is towards my children. My duty is towards my wife. My duty is towards my husband. My duty is towards my parents. My duty is towards my relatives. My duty is towards my extended family. My duty is towards my state. My duty is towards my country. All these different isms, patriotism, communism, altruism, etc. They're all based on this bodily concept. Because I was born in a certain place or in a particular country. I identify myself as an example, Indian. Even when I was born in India, I was born in a place called Maharashtra. It's a state, just like Illinois is a state in the United States. So I can identify myself as a Maharashtrian, or because my mother tongue is Gujarati, I can identify myself as I'm a Gujarati. Or because somebody is born in the United States, either I'm an American, Canadian, Chinese, etc. But I am not this body. Sri Prabhupada gives this example. Right now the sun has already set over Chicago, or I would say most of the Midwest. And it's about to set in the Pacific coast. And it has already risen on the eastern horizon, Japan and Australia. So can the Japanese and the Australian claim that this is a Japanese sun, or the Australians go, oh, this is an Australian sun, and a few hours later it will be over Malaysia, it will be over India. Can the Indians say this is an Indian sun? A few hours later it will be on the Middle East. Can the Saudis say that this is a Saudi Arabian sun? A few hours later it will be on the African continent. Can the African continent or the countries in Africa say that this is an African sun? No. Similarly, as far as the soul is concerned, it is because of the wrong identification we consider it to be us. And that is one of the biggest reasons why we see so many problems in this world. One of the most important lessons that the Vedic culture teaches is Sarvena Sukhi Bhavantu. May everybody thrive and may everybody be happy. Vasudeva Kutumbam. Everybody belongs to the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord himself has said in the scripture. He has said that. Mamayamsha Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. In the Bhagavad Gita. Each and every living entity is my part and parcel. Now if we can get the realization and we can see that every one of us, each one of us, from the ant to the human beings, to the entire species that are surrounding us in our present world and all the different places of existence. If we consider that everything is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and if we identify ourselves with such a perspective, there will be complete harmony. It is because of the discord being on a bodily concept, we have so many issues. Needless to say, the moment we turn on the TV channels or the newspapers or anything, it's just, everything is based on that. Nobody teaches us in the school, colleges or universities this Vigyan or the science of self-realization. Who am I and what is my eternal duty? We have so many duties, and we are not saying that we have to give up taking care of our children or of our family or of our relatives or friends. No, but do not consider that as the highest dharma. That is where the problem lies. When we make that mistake, then we are more embedded, and then we have to come back again and again through the laws of karma and obtain different kinds of bodies, and it is not guaranteed that we will get a human form of life in our next birth. Krishna clearly explains that in the Bhagavad Gita. Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. After childhood, youth, old age, death comes to the body, and then the soul transmigrates to another body befitting one's karma. So, the science of self-realization or the eternal dharma that is being taught by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, it is a platform of higher education which we should all take advantage of. And inquire. It is not that that we will just, wake up one day and we will realize ourselves. Most of us, we hear this terminology in the West, just be yourself. But most of them, they don't know what is the self. Just be yourself. You watch the soap operas on TV, or you watch any, some of those motivational speakers. How many times have you heard this sentence, just be yourself? Please be honest and raise your hands. Just be yourself. We don't know who we are, and then neither the person who is advising, be yourself, he doesn't know, she doesn't know what he or she is, and says, just be yourself. This is the situation. And here we have that greatest opportunity. I tell you, every day when I wake up, I feel so grateful to His Divine Vishnu Prabhupada and His ISKCON movement that somehow or the other He brought me here. And this is not about any kind of some kind of a prejudice statement that I'm making. This is not about Hinduism. This is about the self. The self or the soul is not a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or whatever faith one may believe in. We are all part and parcels of the Supreme Lord. That is the highest realization. And our supreme duty is to serve Him. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radokshaje. Loving devotional service to this eternal personality, the Supreme Lord. Why so? Somebody said, well, I'm serving my family so nicely. I'm a good father. I'm a good parent. I'm a good son. I'm a good brother. I'm a good friend. I'm a good citizen. But let's ask this question, plain and simple. Yes, we do get some happiness when we serve somebody selfless, whether it is your own brother, family, friends, or nation. But how long does it last? Sometimes we introduce, oh, this is my best friend. And a week later, somebody asks us about him, oh, where is John? Or don't even talk about him. I don't want to even hear about him. He is a rascal. So why? Because that person has stopped giving the other person sense gratification. They do not have a meeting of the minds, and that is the reason the best friend or the best relationship breaks. It results into divorce. The best son becomes the worst son in the whole world. The best friend becomes the worst person. They cannot stand each other. Why? And even though if that relationship is so perfect, picture perfect, how long does it last? The husband loves the wife so much, cares for the wife all his life, but one day death cuts that relationship. So all those services that were rendered in that relationship are also cut. And because these relationships are all temporary, our happiness that is derived out of these relationships are also temporary. But if we serve the eternal, then our happiness will be eternal. And that is what we call satsang. What does satsang mean? Most of us have heard the word sat, right? Most of you all who are from the Indian background. What does sat mean? It's a secondary meaning. Indeed, it's the correct answer, but the primary meaning of the word sat means eternal. And truth is eternal. Absolute truth is eternal. Like Srimad Bhagavatam, the very first verse, Satyam Param Dhimahi. O Krishna, you are the absolute truth. Therefore, I bow down to you. Vyasadeva says, Satyam Param Dhimahi. Satyam Param Dhimahi. So, Sat means eternal. Sat means eternal, and Sangha means association. That association that will take us to eternality, that will give us eternal peace, eternal happiness, that is called satsang. Make sense? How much time do we have, Prabhu? What is the time? 5 more minutes. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, identifying so many different verses, just to take up one verse very quickly. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitavano bhuyo ajo nitya shashvatam ayo purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Krishna, the Supreme Lord himself, describes what is the soul. So he says, na jayate. Jo means janma, means born, birth. The soul is never born. Number 1. Number 2, mriyate. It never dies. Va kadachit, never ever. Na ayam, this soul. Na jayate mriyate va kadachit, na ayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyo. Neither in the past, nor in the present, or in the future will this soul cease to exist. Ajo, Jo means janma, birth. Ajo means one that is never born. Ajo. So a soul doesn't come, it doesn't take birth. Jo means janma and ajo means opposite, unborn. Ajo, nitya, it is eternal. Ayam Purano, the oldest. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. When the body is finished, the soul is not finished. And that is one of the reasons, my dear devotees, my dear friends, many a time we have had the association of many different types of thinkers, philosophers. We have attended many interfaith discussions here in Chicago itself many years ago. And none of the faiths can answer this question. What is that question? Somebody asked this question, that this little child has just been born from the mother's womb and is born in such an impoverished condition, extremely poor. The mother has hardly any food to feed the child, is born in a ghetto. Some of them are born on the sidewalk. They don't even have a place to stay. Some of these little children who have just been born are either blind, either they have polio or other different kinds of infectious diseases. So some people say, is God so unjust? He has not even done any karma, or not even worked, or not done anything. Why is it? None of the faiths have an answer to that. And we have had the fortune of studying the Bible, the Quran, and most of the faiths in the world. And when I came, although born as a Hindu, if I might tell, those answers were never clear until we came across the books of His Divine Grace Prabhupada. So most of the people in this world do not believe, or the faiths do not believe in the transmigration of the soul. Srila Prabhupada discussed this with Professor Kotarski at Moscow University, and this great theologist said after the body dies, everything is finished. So why is it that this little child is born in that very terrible condition, and one little child is born in a palace with a golden spoon in the mouth? And all the different facilities. So that tells us that it is the soul who has transmigrated from previous body according to one's actions or karma, has obtained a particular body or a place. Srimad Bhagavatam, in the conversation between Devuti Mata and his son Kapil Dev, Karmana Daiva Netrata Devu Jantu Upavate. According to one's karma, and under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, a soul gets a befitting body and befitting parents, whether they are animal parents or a human parent. So this is a very higher science. Simply just because this body is finished, no. Krishna says, Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya. As soon as these clothes become old, what do? We discard them. Don't we? Don't we all do that? when our jacket tears or when our shirt or our dress is worn out, we discard it and we get a new one. Similarly, based on our actions or karma, we get a new body. And in order to get out of this particular vicious cycle of obtaining new bodies in this material world where there is birth, death, old age and disease, a cycle of repetition, which in Sanskrit is called samsara. What does samsara mean? A cycle, a repetition of birth, death, old age and disease in different species of life. Based on our... Right now, whatever actions we perform, we are already preparing our next body. And in order to get out of this vicious cycle and go back home, back to Godhead, to the eternal spiritual world where it is described that our body will be eternal, it is not subject to the material time and decay. The moment a child is born, every second we are going close to our death. Every second we are moving close to our death. But there is a spiritual world known as, that is described, again, Shabda Praman, Lord Brahma himself, who is the spiritual master in our line of the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. He says, Shriya Kantaha Kantaha Parama Purushaha Kalpataramo Dhruma Bhumi Ischintamani Gadamai Toyam Amrutam Katha Ganam Natyam Gamana Picha Vamshi Priya Sakhi Chidananda Jyoti Paramapi Tada Swadhyamapi Cha Shayatra Shiradi Surabhibhyascha Sumahan Nimeshardhakyo Va Vrajati Nayatrapi Samayaha Bhaje Shveta Deepam Tamah Iha Golokamitiyam Vidantaste Santah Shiti Viraracharaha Katipaye. Brahma Samhita, chapter number 5, verse number 56. Describing the spiritual world where we actually belong. Shri Akantaha Kantaha Parama Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, the most attractive, beautiful person, is being served by so many wonderful living entities there, in their spiritual forms. And where that land is full of desire trees, where there are oceans of milk, and there are numberless cows that give unlimited milk, that place where time of this material world does not exist, not even for half a moment. Unto that land I offer my humble obeisances. Bhaje Shveta Deepam Tamaham Iha Goloka Vitiyam, that place is known as Golok Vrindavan. So that is attaining perfection through the eternal duty. Once that does not say that give up your family, give up your other duties, no. Continue those duties, but keep the Supreme Lord in the center, because He is eternal, we are eternal, we have an eternal connection, and therefore our dharma is eternal with Him. Do what it takes to keep this body and soul together and give this sublime Krishna consciousness to everyone, including your children, your friends. Educate yourself. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, tomorrow is Gaur Purnima, one of the biggest days in our Sampradaya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. So I request all of you, please come, hear about the pastimes of the Supreme Lord in His most munificent avatar. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came here to give us love of Godhead. Most faiths, including, if I may say, Hinduism, we are taught fear God. But His Divine Krishna Prabhupada and our spiritual master says, don't fear God, love God. Loving God, and that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give us, how to love Him, how to re-establish that loving relationship with the Supreme Lord. That is Sri Krishna. who came in the mood of the highest devotee, Srimati Radharani, full of compassion, to give us that. And the processes, Mahaprabhu has recommended, Chetan, Darpan Detu Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadava Agni Nirvapanam Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Ananda Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipada Purnam Rutswadanam Sarvatma Snapannam Param Brijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. How do we get self-realized? How do we realize that I am not this body, I am a spirit soul? It's simply by cleansing our consciousness. And how do we do that? By chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing of our consciousness. Bhava Mahadava Agni Nirvapanam, we will cross over this material ocean. And what will we obtain? The positivity will be Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. Our hearts will be so cleansed that we will be able to obtain this realization that I am an eternal servant of Krishna. And my service to Krishna is the highest Vidya Vadu Jivanam. And when that happens, Ananda Ambudhi Vardhanam, our ocean of bliss will keep increasing. Sarva Atma Snapannam, we will be cleansed. And not only that, we will actually bathe Krishna with our love. Sarva Atma means Krishna, who is in everybody's heart. Just like when tomorrow we will be performing the Abhishek of Gaur Nitai with many beautiful liquids like ghee, milk, syrup, fruit juices, yogurt, with lots of love. Similarly, with our love, we can bathe the Supreme Lord, Sarva Atma Snapannam. And this chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra will give us the highest victory. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. This Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu came to give us through his ambassadors like his Divine Vishnu Prabhupada, will give us the highest victory. The highest victory is when we go beyond this bodily concept. The highest victory is when we know who I am. The highest victory is when we understand and realize our eternal duty. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki Gaur Premanande.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It was wonderfully explained. He very wonderfully inaugurated our theme for this month. So please think about that. He gave a lot of points to think about who we are. And beautifully explained. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So again, who are you? Can you please raise your hand? And we have Krishna Sundar Prabhu. We will please come and see him. He will basically escort you, and he will also explain a little bit about the temple here. Also, we have a small gift for you. So the rest of the people, you can